Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Neighbor threatened to ruin my reputation and cut down my trees. I let the IRS shut down their business." Even nice people have their limits, and no matter how nice you are, well, it is always nice to see someone get the bad karma they deserve. So I have resided in a small town all of my life. I live on a nice property that has plenty of room for my dogs to run around and plenty of room for me to enjoy either by myself or, if I ever want to, have friends over. The neighbors have always been really friendly towards me, and I enjoyed welcoming people over with open arms and a nice hot cup of coffee very frequently. Except one of my neighbors was not so friendly. We frequently had neighborhood parties or community events, and we never saw this couple attending them. Like I said earlier, we did live in a pretty small town, so everyone knew everyone's business. They moved in next door to me about 3 or 4 years ago, and although they were not rude or anything like that, they were just not very approachable. They also liked to brag about how much money they had and how much they disliked the government and how they would not ever give the IRS a penny. Anyways, I bet you are wondering what this has to do with my story. It's important to mention this because, as it turns out, they were very rude and malicious people. I will start by telling you guys that there are a lot of trees on my property. Actually, there are a lot of trees on everyone's property in this neighborhood. Except this couple. They had some bushes and small trees, but nothing like the huge oak trees we had. Well, they also ran their own fire log business, and recently it had even seemed that they had bought a new work truck for it and some new equipment. From what I knew and understand, they ran their business mostly from home, which in this day and age is pretty normal. Especially in a smaller town like this where you have a lot of farmers and such, most people based their business out of their house and then would travel out to the locations in which they needed to work at. You will see how this comes into the story later. Behind our houses is a forestry area, the woods as us small town folk call it. Our backyards are right up against it, and between all of the trees on our property, it could be hard to tell where our backyard ends and where the forest begins. Sometimes professional crew had come out and clean up the woods and cut back bushes or some overgrown trees. We are prone to wildfires, so this is important to us. One day, my wife and I were working out in the yard when she came up to me asking if I had cut down some trees in the further part of our backyard. I had said no. As a matter of fact, I was slacking on our backyard work. I figured they were cleaning up the wooded area and mistook some in our backyard for the forest. I brushed it off and went about my day because I honestly thought it was an honest mistake. A couple of days later, I was returning home when I waved at my unfriendly neighbors. To my surprise, they came up to me. They started asking me about the oak trees on my property and if I ever planned to cut them down. I had told them that we planned to trim them and such, but never cut them down to the stumps and whatnot. They had said that we should really do something about the trees in the back because they seemed overgrown and it was an eyesore to look at. I was pretty taken aback by this one because we have never really talked, and second, even if they were an eyesore, who really cared? They were far enough in our backyard that they blended in with the forest. They then offered to cut the trees themselves as they had the equipment and such sitting right in their yard. I politely declined just because their intentions were not very friendly. They started telling me that they were going to tell people that I was a terrible neighbor and that I didn't maintain my yard. They were ashamed to live next to a pigsty. I let them know that if they really had a problem with my yard or me, they could report it to the city, but of course they never did that. The next day, another neighbor came up to me and asked me what was going on since he saw me talking to the not so nice neighbors. I had to laugh a little bit, us small town people are just so nosy. Anyways, I explained to him that they were complaining about our trees and they wanted us to cut them down. When I let my neighbor know this, he immediately told me to be careful because there were rumors going around that these people were operating their tree business under the table and either cutting down trees without permission or stealing firewood logs off of people's property. This immediately raised my suspicions, and I thought about the tree stumps my wife had pointed out to me just a week ago. I had security cameras, but they were not pointed to the trees in my backyard, so I rearranged them so that they were pointed to that area in my backyard, and sure enough, just a couple of days later, when my wife and I were out of town for 2 weeks, there were several of our trees that were cut down. I immediately looked at the footage, and it was our neighbors. Instead of confronting them directly, I decided to be petty about it and submit an anonymous tip to the police department about their business being illegal, but also to the IRS about them potentially evading taxes. Well, unfortunately for them, not only did the police get involved, but so did the IRS. It turns out they cut down so many people's trees without permission that between all of us, they had to pay about $300,000. They had to sell all of their business equipment and sell their house. So long, tree cutters. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, for some reason I always enjoy the revenge stories where the IRS gets involved. Especially when trees are also involved. Either way, if you still enjoy the stories about crazy neighbors and entitled people, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled, "Let Me Walk Away, Dude." Some background: I'm a practicing internal medicine physician and formerly a 50% owner in what was once a fairly successful med spa with 4 locations. At least until what happened below. Before anyone accuses me of breaking the law, this has been litigated, resolved, and I won. But it is a funny story. In the beginning, my business partner and I were mere acquaintances working with a large hospitalist practice. Looking for extra income to pay off student loans, we decided to band together and open a med spa offering Botox, minor cosmetic procedures, B12 infusions, etc. And it was a huge hit. Big enough for us to go full-time and expand. This lasted around 7 years. Beginnings of problems: my partner decides that his wife is not enough for him and begins to step out on her. Now, this is none of my business, however, it does become my business when you embezzle money to pay for your sugar baby's gifts from our business account. Fast forward a few years and I have sat on this information because business overall was too good to walk away from it. However, COVID changed things and we had to close 2 of our 4 locations. My partner has never been great with money or time management, which is why for the most part I handled all of the back office stuff, from ordering supplies to billing and payroll and so on. This comes into play later. Around 6 months ago, I began looking for a new position and found a new job. I did not want to leave my partner in a hard spot, so I gave him a 90-day notice to find another partner or otherwise get his business affairs in order before I resigned. He instead used this time to siphon off more funds for his side piece and allow his unruly children to ransack my office while I was away on a family vacation, as well as frequently not showing up to work or showing up late or super hungover, leaving me to do extra work. My time to go and time to get even. Finally, the time had come to wind down my time per hour agreement. My partner was to buy out my 50% of the practice, which we agreed would occur on the Monday of my last week. Basically, I would take 50% of our liquid assets as a bank transfer. Monday, upon checking, the bank account had been locked out, and upon regaining access I found that 30k of my half had been moved to an account I didn't have access to. I had it and spent the next few days plotting my revenge. Remember those back office things that I handled above? Well, all of those documents, processes, order forms, etc., well, they are all on our shared office hard drive and absolutely vital to the practice, and way too much work for my partner to do himself in a short time. I just so happened to buy an identical model and take the original hard drive home with me. Upon plugging the hard drive in, I found a backup of his calendar, pictures and emails between him and his mistress, which I forwarded to his wife. The following day, I ran a full-page ad in the local paper announcing a special holiday deal on our services which we had planned. Lastly, I hired some college students to write a slew of bad reviews on Google and Yelp to tank the overall ratings. Aftermath. The week after my departure, the clinic was insanely busy and quickly ran out of supplies. Since the order forms etc. were gone, he had to turn away new and long-standing customers. My partner sued for the documents etc. and I counter-sued for the $30,000 he owed me. We settled by exchanging the two. I have since heard his wife divorced him and his mistress left him, and subsequently he has filed for bankruptcy as the clinic never recovered and his wife cleaned him out. I, on the other hand, really like my new job. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, that was absolutely insanely satisfying revenge. And by the way, if you have any revenge stories to share of your own, I would really appreciate it if you could post them either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, which is our own subreddit. The next one is titled, Am I the Butthole for Ignoring the HOA? So, I live in a cottage that I inherited after my grandfather passed away 3 years ago. The cottage is one of the oldest homes in the area, and unlike my neighbors, I'm not a member of the HOA. The cottage itself is a waterfront one in which I have a small grass yard that turns into a beach on the lake. Damn, what a lucky guy. I never had a problem until recently over a seaplane and boys. Due to having a private pilot's license and being really fortunate, I own a Piper Super Cub on floats. When I'm not flying the plane, it's either tied to my dock or is pulled up onto the beach and strapped down when the weather is bad. A month ago, I decided to make some new additions to my property. These additions were 2 lines of buoys at the edge of my property with signs on each. The buoys extended 15 feet past my dock and are still technically on my property. The signs themselves are ones that I got custom made warning about prop wash. I decided to add the buoys and signs because whenever I take my seaplane out there, sometimes boaters and kayakers who will stop to watch me leave. Normally, this is not an issue if they keep their distance, however recently they've been getting too close for comfort. With the addition of the buoys, I can keep a 100 by 300 feet safety rectangle. This makes it so that at the bare minimum, I will always have around 100 feet off of each wing of safe space. Additionally, it prevents people from cutting me off when I come to dock or park on the beach. About a week and a half ago, I got a letter from the HOA. The HOA is demanding that I move my plane to a local seaplane base as well as remove my buoys and signs. In response, I wrote them a letter explaining the reasons behind having the buoys and told them I have no intention of changing anything. About 2 days later, I got an angry visitor who was an HOA member. I told her that if she or the HOA comes onto my property again, they will get arrested for trespassing, and before leaving she used some very colorful words and called me an a-hole. And ripe stars, I would like to ask you, do you think that OP is the a-hole and the HOA is in the right here? Let us know what you think in the comments. Either way, a user in the comments said, yet another HOA thinking they can flex on their neighbors. Screw them. Another person said, not the a-hole, you mention in other comments that you have documentation on your ownership that proves the legality of your actions. I would hire an attorney and stop replying to them yourself. Have the attorney send a letter to the HOA to kindly stop harassing you when you're not part of the HOA, and that any harassment would be reported to the authorities. If you can afford it, set up cameras and let them know any trespassers will be recorded. The next one is titled, Should Not Have Stolen My Lights. Preface, this story wrapped up last night. Background, I was dating a guy, BF, long distance last summer and things were going pretty well. I was in DC and boyfriend was in Chicago, and I was about to move to Spain temporarily for a really cool opportunity, and BF and I discussed that after I returned to the US, I would move to Chicago and we would go from being long distance to a normal couple. My lease was going to end right as I was going to move to Spain. Instead of finding a way to store all my things for a year and then subsequently move them to Chicago, I figured that this was a perfect time to downsize. I got rid of a lot of clothing, sold my furniture, and just decided to keep some essentials, sentimental items, and portable, expensive electronics. I only brought the essentials to Spain, whatever would fit in my luggage, and BF offered to store my sentimental items and electronics. I did not mind him using or borrowing the electronics while I was gone, game console and game, JBL speaker, and my Hue lights, and he installed the Hue lights in his condo. I visited him for a week and a half right before moving to Spain, and we had a little bit of tension and the visit was a little bit rocky. I thought we were going to be able to work through things and recover, but right as I moved to Spain, BF ghosts me for a month and then breaks up with me over a text message. We briefly text about how I can get my belongings back, as well as the $400 he owes me. I'm depressed and lacking a support group in Spain, coupled with the language barrier, and so I decide to return to the US sooner than anticipated, and I actually end up moving to Chicago anyways because I was over DC and got a nice job offer in Chicago. BF returns my sentimental items on his own accord, but does not return my electronics other than my game console. I tried to contact him, but he blocked my number, Instagram, WhatsApp, Venmo, and Splitwise. I tried approaching him in person the couple of times I bumped into him and asked him if we could discuss my electronics and the money he owes me, and he completely blows me off and is extremely rude. Obviously, I conclude that he has no intention to return my electronics or pay me back the money he owes me, and I am angry. I try to be patient and diplomatic and attempt to talk to him a few more times whenever I bumped into him, but he was acting the same. I finally write him an email saying, "Don't worry about the money you owe me, just please return my things," and gave my roommate his phone number so that they could coordinate. He finally responds to my roommate and says that he will send someone over the weekend to return my things. Yay! When the person dropped off my things, they only brought the games and speaker. BF kept my Hue lights. I run into him once more and ask him when I could get my Hue lights back. He shrugs, and I asked him if he planned on returning them. He shrugs again. I ask him point blank if he was stealing them from me, and he says, "I guess you could call it that." I finally give up and decide to order new Hue lights and cut my losses. The revenge part: when I was setting up my new Hue lights, I noticed that I was still connected to my prior pair that my BF had stolen, and that some of them were even on. I think it's a glitch or something and turned them off and don't think anything about it, but then they came back on. I was confused and curious, so I turned them off again. A few seconds later they came back on, and I suddenly realized that I was still connected and had just shut off BF's lights twice. I beam with excitement. I don't turn them off again because I don't want him to figure out what is going on. BF does not work until about noon and likes to sleep in until 11 AM. He is also very sensitive to light when he sleeps, so much so that he black out curtains so that he can sleep in that long. I personally wake up at 7 AM to go to work, so for the last couple of weeks I've made a habit of turning BF's light on at the same time that I wake up and watching them go off a few minutes later, giving me the sweet satisfaction that I am disturbing his sleep in the morning. I don't think I've ever been so happy to wake up in the morning. I do this for a couple of weeks until he reaches out to my roommate and finally returns my lights last night. I suppose he thought they were defective or something. Obviously, I did not post while I was enacting my petty revenge, as I didn't want my fun to be cut short. But now that my lights have been returned, I am posting for just a tad bit more petty revenge. I hope he finds this post. It would be the icing on the cake. I want him to know it was me. And yeah guys, who knows, maybe the boyfriend even sees this YouTube video. That would make it even more sweet. Anyway, if you have any revenge stories to share of your own, please don't forget to post them either here in the comments under this video or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, which is very much appreciated. Thank you so much.